and Unsolved Mysteries, the National Park Service's brochure on Fossil Butte reveals the contradictions that result when using an ancient Earth time frame to explain rapid burial. On one hand, it speculates on the existence of a lake, wherein many animals and plants probably died natural deaths. On the other hand, the evidence forces the conclusion that, on several occasions, huge numbers of fish were killed suddenly. The brochure then equates those several occasions to rapid burial by precipitation of calcium carbonate, the primary rock mineral enclosing the fossils, year after year for hundreds of thousands of years. This is a truly incredible scenario, to have such a vast number of fish reproducing within a short time, only to be wiped out by a succeeding catastrophe a year or so later, and this to be repeated several 100,000 times. Paleontologists should long ago have seen the fallacy in this scenario, if for no other reason, because of the beautifully preserved fossil palm fronds. Put very simply, palm trees don't grow in water, and their fronds are not ripped off by gentle breezes. Only a catastrophe of huge proportions can account for the perfectly preserved fossils at Fossil Butte. The rocks there are, like many in the Grand Canyon, primarily calcium carbonate. They all had a common source: the interaction of volcanic gases with lime thrown up from the basins of the pre-flood seas. This commonality, together with the evidence of rapid deposition and burial, tells us plainly that Fossil Butte and the Grand Canyon originated in the same great event, the catastrophe of the worldwide flood. But is there any other evidence which would confirm that Fossil Butte is only as old as the flood? The answer is yes. Geologists have repeatedly identified the Fossil Butte site as belonging to the Eocene, which they assume was 50 to 60 million years ago. But we have already seen from my studies on coalified wood and the chart on the collapse of geologic time that the Eocene fits into the framework of a worldwide flood only several thousand years ago. So there is no question that the entire Fossil Butte occurrence fits only within the framework of a worldwide flood and a young age of the Earth. And there is more. Not everything was buried on the first day of the flood. The waters were rising for 40 days. Land animals large enough to survive part of that period left a remarkable record of their efforts to escape the flood's rising waters. That record is found in coal, and it is truly fascinating.
Dinosaur tracks in coal. Amazing, extraordinary. How in the world did they ever get there? Obviously, in the past, there was a huge seam of vegetation in this area. Dinosaurs were walking around on top of that vegetation before it turned to coal. But how long ago was that? How old are the dinosaurs? That's what we want to know. This other dinosaur track tells the story. It's right adjacent to one of these coalified logs here in this coal mine in Price, Utah. In fact, it's only about 100 feet away from the coalified log that we saw earlier. So we know that whatever the age of the coalified wood, the dinosaurs were of the same age.
In the coal mine, we saw two dinosaur tracks. Were those the only two dinosaur tracks in the coal mines here in eastern Utah? Not at all. Here in the College of Eastern Utah Prehistoric Museum, look what has been taken out of these coal mines. Look at all these dinosaur tracks, different sizes. Some flesh-eating dinosaurs, some plant-eating dinosaurs. Why were they all together? To answer that question, let's look at the Kenilworth Mine fossil map. It says there are at least 8 different track types within 100 meters on the mine's roof surface. Over here on the map itself, here we can see all the tracks and the coalified logs. According to the sign, those dinosaurs were tromping around in a swamp. Common sense tells you that can't be true. There's no swamp in the world that will preserve such tracks. All those dinosaurs were together for a reason.
They were trying to escape the rising waters of a worldwide flood.
These charts help illustrate how dinosaur tracks could have formed at the time of the flood and why they exist in coal today. The pre-flood Earth was covered with lush vegetation, a scene of beauty everywhere. Then came the flood. Torrential rain and the fountains of the great deep bursting open caused Earth's lush vegetation to be swept up in the flood's rising waters. This vegetation accumulated in great mats and then was deposited by the ebb and flow of tidal waves produced by volcanic activity in the pre-flood seas. Each tidal action left its deposit of sediment within or over the layer of vegetation. The dinosaurs, being quite heavy, were able to survive many of the early tidal actions as they sought to escape the rising waters of the flood. When the tidal waters briefly receded, the dinosaurs continued their search for higher ground, leaving their tracks in the sediments that were freshly deposited over the vegetation. At times, their great weight caused their tracks to penetrate the sedimentary layer into the mat of vegetation. That mat of vegetation has since turned into coal, and wherever the dinosaurs left their original imprints, there we still find an indelible record of their tracks in coal today. If all these dinosaurs were congregating together and swept up by the rising waters of the flood, we might also expect that they would be buried together. And indeed, here at Dinosaur National Monument in Vernal, Utah, we see a giant fossil dinosaur graveyard. The time has come to draw some conclusions about the age of the dinosaurs and the age of the fossil fish found at Fossil Butte National Monument. Here at Dinosaur National Monument, there's a sign that says these dinosaur bones are 145 million years old, the so-called Jurassic era. But we know that can't really be true at all. Remembering our early results on the coalified wood, there we found the collapse of geologic time. The Eocene, the Cretaceous, the Jurassic, and the Triassic, we found were all together only several thousand years ago. The fossil fish in the Eocene, the dinosaurs in the Cretaceous, the Jurassic, and the Triassic, all again collapsed to just several thousand years ago, buried at the time of the worldwide flood.
This evidence disputes the whole evolutionary theory of life's origin and development. But some may ask, hasn't science proven dinosaurs lived hundreds of millions of years ago? It's just the opposite, according to the new evidence described by Dr. Andrew Snelling of the Creation Science Foundation of Australia.
This May 1995 issue of the journal Science has a picture of a bee enclosed in amber. It's similar to the bee in the specimen of Dominican amber that we have here. Geologists think that both specimens are between 25 and 40 million years old. And now that's a big problem for them because they have now extracted from the abdomen of the bee bacteria, live bacteria. This result supports earlier findings of over 1,000 types of bacteria from other insects, some that date with the dinosaurs. Until now, many evolutionists thought those findings were due to laboratory contamination. They just couldn't believe bacteria could survive for tens or hundreds of millions of years. But this new result, coming after 4 years of careful analysis, rules out laboratory contamination. As a scientist, the reason why I believe the bacteria were found in the bee in the Dominican amber and in other fossils previously of the same age as the dinosaurs is because they're really all quite young. These have to be the result of being encased and buried in a worldwide flood.